In this district, there are a tremendous number of Cornishmen, and I need not tell His Royal Highness that it was the Cousin Jacks who made Bendigo, who found the gold and developed the mines. They have added more to the riches of the Commonwealth than any other class of people. When he visits the mines today, he will find that 90% of the miners are Cornishmen, or the descendants of Cornishmen.
For 10 generations my family has mined tin, the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the din. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down. I have a collection at home on my wall, tools that our family has used. Shovels and axes, picks and gads, even a gunpowder fuse. For 10 generations my family has mined tin, the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the din. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down.
At the time that gold was discovered in Australia, in America, and of course other metals, copper in particular in South Australia, a lot of Cornishmen were going through very hard times because the mines in Cornwall, where tin and copper had been mined for centuries, were being worked out. Of course, life in Cornwall was pretty hard, and it was becoming worse as the mines became worked out and more people were left without work. Some of the miners moved around England at first, trying to remain within the country before they took that last step of moving to go to faraway minefields.
The Cornish arrived in Bendigo probably in 2 stages. The first batch came across from South Australia. Copper mining will start to go into decline, and so many people decided they'd come out and take the chances in a new country. And when they come out to Australia, better conditions, better weather and so forth, they wrote letters back home. As a result, there was a fair Cornish population in South Australia.
Oh, when I sailed across the sea, heave away, haul away, a girl said she'd be true to me, bound for South Australia. Heave away, you rolling kings, heave away, haul away, heave away, oh, hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia.
It's a pretty well-known fact that the Cornish were drawn first to the copper mines in South Australia. The main one that they went to was Barra, and there were a number of Cornish people settled there while the copper mining was in progress. Later on they went down to Moonta and the copper mining there, but when gold was discovered in Victoria, their first thought was to get across here as fast as they could. And there was another place in South Australia, Kapunda, and from there the miners, and in many cases their wives, made the long journey across here to Bendigo, and more to Bendigo it seems than to other places, but certainly to the Victorian goldfields.
Now, one of the advantages of Bendigo over a lot of the other places was that it wasn't every man's ambition to have his son follow him down the mine. They were miners, but they were aware of the habits and they didn't necessarily want their sons to follow them down. Now the type of mining that was operated in the deep mining meant there was as many people worked on top of the surface as there was down below, so there was a better opportunity for them to get a job above the surface than it was down below.
We must understand that the Cornish had been mining for centuries, and they knew pretty well anything that was to be known about hard rock mining, because that's what they were used to. And Bendigo, of course, was a field of hard rock mining too, being quartz mining. And the Cornish really were the ones who were able to work out where they should mine, and they were also able to by their skills, work that gold.
The reason that the miners came to St Just Point, and virtually St Just Point got its name after that, was because a large group came across in the same ship. They came up in the same train, and they went out and settled in that spot that was virtually void of deep mining, and they went there in a spot, and that's where a lot of them set up their tents for a start. Some of them moved off to other locations to set up their permanent residence, but a large percentage of them stayed. The miners in Bendigo, even though it was at one stage the Australia's leading minefield, and probably still to this day is the 7th most richest in the world, it was exploited rather than worked as an industry. Now what I mean by that was that a lot of companies would chase the high-paying ore and often overlook ore that would be payable. And when they found this high-paying ore, they would work 3 shifts, and that had two benefits. It gave them a greater return, but also brought up the share price. I think history would show there's more money made in shares in Bendigo than there was on gold, actually. But when things got back to normal, there would be a group of miners out of work. So that meant that they'd go and get another job. Now, because Long Gully, or St Just Point, was in the middle of Bendigo's most worked or produced 5 mile of Bendigo, and a 2-mile walk at that period wasn't an onerous job, and many miners had to work as many as 2 or 3 mines a year to get a job. Long Gully was a good spot to cover most of the fields.
Harvey Town was originally settled by the Harvey brothers from Cornwall. For some years they'd worked in the copper mines over at Munter. The Munter copper mines were starting to falter. They were no longer as profitable as they were in its earlier days. So the Harvey brothers overlanded from Munter to the Bendigo goldfields. The part of the Bendigo goldfields that they eventually settled in was where we're sitting now, Harvey Town. And Harvey Town in its heyday housed 3,000 to 4,000 people, a community of its own. Independent of Eaglehawk, had its own hotel, the Lady Berkeley, halfway between Harvey Town and Eaglehawk. The gold mines were all around the place, Obviously the Cornishmen were miners, most of them, that eventually settled here in Harvey Town after the original Harvey brothers.
In the early days on Bendigo, of course, as I have pointed out, there were a number of Cornish people, and most people will be aware that the Cornish were overwhelmingly Methodist, and this was mainly because of the work of John Wesley in Cornwall. But here in Bendigo, the first religious service is said to have been held by Jimmy Jeffrey, who was a Cornish Methodist, and he stood on a stump at a place where the Golden Square Methodist Sunday School now is. He preached, he sang a hymn, and he found that he was surrounded by quite a number of Cornishmen who were looking for some way to express themselves in their religion.
The church, to a lot of people around Long Gully, irrespective of the denomination, was that it was the centre of their activities. I mean, I say that's where you had your tea meetings, that's where you met people, that's where you could sing your songs, you could let your hair down. A lot of women went along there to look at the other women's hats to see how they were dressed, but that wasn't the main thing. It was the centre of their culture, and so it meant a place where they could meet, and meant very important to it.
Of course, some of the churches, or many of the churches that were built in the first years, were not large enough to take the congregations which grew, and these grew mainly in the 1870s, as the Cornish came in greater numbers to work the mines which were opening in greater numbers. Some churches were just built onto, but in other cases they built a complete new church to take the place of the one that had been there before. One of the things which I haven't mentioned and which was very important in the church life was the revivals. Now these were usually called Cornish revivals because they had begun in Cornwall. They would set a week at a particular church where they were going to hold revivals, and people would be prepared to come every day and every night. And if a person was finding it hard to get to the stage where they could actually say, well, I'm saved, other people would gather around them and pray. They'd be singing. Often the people who were saying that they had just found God had really been regular church attenders, but they all liked to join in, and they liked to tell how bad they'd been before they became so good.
The Varlin Villa, as I called it, was a type of house that where a miner would start off with a limited income. He'd build the minimum requirement, which usually 1 or 2 rooms. Usually it was out of weatherboard. In some cases it would have been the clay gravel of the creek to make bricks, mud bricks, to make an abode. It's not necessarily unusual in Cornwall. They used to build a lot of houses over there that method. So a lot of people that come out from Cornwall would have probably knew how to build a house like that. But basically, most of the houses were weatherboard. So they made a minimum amount of accommodation with ordinary hip roof to move in. The rooms would have been lined with lining boards up to dado height. That's where you're likely to get most of the activity or brush against the wall. Above that, it would have been plain hessian with maybe coats of newspaper painted to it. With in most cases, it would be pipe clay. Pipe clay was a clay that appeared in the bottom of a creek just above the gravel line. It was white. Mixed with water, it made it quite a good white paint. So the more out of a special room, they might have covered that, instead of painting it white, they might have covered it with wallpaper. Now, as the man's family grew, or his financial situation altered, he would probably have another room onto it, and that would mean that it would be 2 hip roofs. Then as he continued again, he'd put another roof on the back, and it was a long sloping skillion. Now that was called, rightly or wrong, but nicknamed the kangaroo, because you looked at it, it looked like a kangaroo actually. So there was a hip and valley, and there was the kangaroo style of roof. Now, because the well-known architect in Bendigo was responsible for quite a lot of prestige buildings, was Mr. Varland, a German architect, and I suppose with tongue-in-cheek they used to call these houses Varland's villas. Now, some people might suggest that, Mr. Varland designed these to help the people out, but if you look around the world, they're not exclusive necessary to Bendigo, so I don't think Mr. Varland would be over in some of the places that I've seen them, so I'll have to rule that argument out. Tut work in Cornwall virtually means that a miner was paid by the amount of ore he got out. A miner who had a tribute, he was also paid by the amount of ore got out, but he had to supply certain things that the tut worker didn't have to do, but the benefit was he could share in the profits that the mine owners got for the ore. Now, the problem was in that is that the ore price was down, so was the tributers' wages. But if it was up, he got higher wages. There again, the people that used to buy the ore, they had what they call a ticketing system, and that was open to corruption. And it meant that in many cases those supplying the ore didn't get the price they deserved in comparison with the price that the others got for producing the copper. So yes, and so in other words, the miner didn't get his just deserves, and even so some of the mine owners there didn't, but the merchants or those that refined the ore done better than those that got it out. Now in Bendigo it was a little bit different. In one stage of the game there, the mining industry is a bit fickle. At least when you went down the copper mine you could see it, and you work out how long it did you take to get it out, so you could come to agreement. But you wouldn't know how thick how thick the gold was by just looking at the rock. So it was a little bit of a gamble. Mine owners had the problem of they wouldn't allow a tribute if they could do better by wages for obvious reasons. So it meant that the tributes here in Bendigo would only have to take a large risk, and many people didn't make much more than, well, they're well below the breadline actually. If you struck it, it was a bit like winning tats. You often heard about it, but that was as often as winning tats. And at one period there, particularly in about the 1890s, mines couldn't operate in Bendigo without the tribute system, which means that they were exploited a little bit, the miners were exploited there.
The tragedy of these sort of places, Harvey Down, Long Gully, California Gully, where the Cornish and the mining was prevalent, busy, highly mechanised and whatever, highly industrialised. But as old Lancel said, men are cheaper than timber. You wouldn't bother making sure your shafts were secure, you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't do that to make working conditions more palatable. And the tragedy of the mining communities, of course, was miners' phthisis, silica dust on the lungs from where they were blasting down below. The quartz dust would highly concentrated with silica. That would get in the miners' lungs and sweat like concrete. They couldn't breathe. My old great-grandfather Bull, who lived only 200 yards from here, when he was in his late 30s and early 40s and dying, couldn't breathe. The only way he could breathe was his arms tied to the top of the bed, and he would rasp his breath away for his last 4 or 5 years of life, going, ah, ah. That was the tragedy of mining. That was what the women and the children's legacy was, of poverty, no unemployment release, no widows' pensions. Women had to take in washing or whatever they could do to just get enough food on the table for their kids and themselves. It's all right, people saying about the golden past and that, but Jesus, they weren't very bloody happy days. You know, in Eaglehawk, the Cornish miners and the other miners in Eaglehawk, the old blokes, and we're saying old in inverted commas, often they were blokes in their 30s and 40s. The Eaglehawk cemetery's full of them. Miners' phthisis was it left the lungs weakened. It made miners more susceptible to tuberculosis. They had families who were poorly fed. They had wives who were hag-ridden and thin and whatever. The kids and their wives were also more susceptible to tuberculosis. The authorities didn't want it spread if they could help it. There was all these signs of no spitting. Only got to go down to the Eaglehawk Cemetery and have a look at old Henry Young's grave, and 9 kids there with him under 10. Horrifying stuff. You know, I mean, Eaglehawk's history's fantastic, but you've got to realise that it's been a hell of a history. You know, it's a nice, prosperous little town and everything else, but it was paid for with miners' blood, paid for with Cornishmen's blood. Yes. It's all right to look at the great mansions of the mine managers and the mine owners and the Lancells and all of them. They didn't make Bendigo. Bendigo and Eaglehawk and Harvey Town and Golden Square and everywhere else was made on the lungs and the blood and whatever of Cornish miners. Harvey Town that we're looking at now, no pub, no school. There was never a school here. The Lady Barclay was the pub. But there were nearly 4,000 people here. My great-grandma and great-grandfather ran a little grocery shop here. And Bob Carr had a plumbing business. The area around, and we're saying the area around, but only 300 yards from here was the Great Williams United, the first gold mine in Bendigo to have electricity underground. All the Prince line down here, the New Era up the back. Over a little bit further from Harvey Town in Devonshire Gully, the great Devonshire mines and the gold dumps company that cyanided for gold up in the 1930s and the 1940s, all provided employment for the Harvey Town men. But as I say, by the 1920s, Harvey Town was dwindling. By the 1930s and the 40s, it was reduced to a couple of dozens. By the 1950s, it was reduced to a dozen. Now it's starting to make a little bit of a comeback. There's new people settling. Transport gives more mobility. It was a bloody long way here from my mum to trudge home from Harvey Town with a bloody string bag laden with the meat and the groceries. But times change. Now people hop in a car, they're in Eaglehawk in 2 minutes, and Harvey Town's starting to grow again. And that's the story of a town, the story of a little Cornish town.
For 10 generations my family has mined in the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the din. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down. I have a collection at home on my wall, tools that our family has used. Shovels and axes, picks and gads, even a gunpowder fuse. For 10 generations my family has mined tin, the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the tin. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down. Pitmen, tributers, shaft sinkers, engine men, these were the workers of tin. Tot workers, bow maidens, even a captain of a mine, they have all been my kin. For 10 generations my family has mined tin, the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the tin. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down. My great-grandfather died, his lungs full of dust. Great-uncle went to mine abroad. Father stayed at home, a tinner down Cornbray, which isn't far from me or down the road. For 10 generations my family has mined tin, the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the tin. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down. Colonel is a quiet place, now the mines are capped, the stamps are still or gone. Engine houses empty, some fallen into ruin, but to hear the mining sounds I long. For 10 generations my family has mined tin, the hammers, the stamps, the drills and the tin. But now that's all over, no more working underground. Gone are the winning days, the mines have all closed down.